And welcome to episode 10 of the podcast. You may not agree with this,
but
I'm Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And you know, it's hard to believe, Eric, here we are, week 10 of the high school football season. We got this coming week and one more week of the regular season left before we dive into the postseason.
10 exciting weeks of local football, man. I mean, all these teams really battling and scuffling and getting ready for the playoffs.
And you know, for a lot of teams, their playoffs, for some, has already started, but for a lot, it's like playoff games this week and next.
Yeah, definitely for some, Shady's really making a push to move up in the rankings in the playoff picture. And now Woodrow, the Flying Eagles have taken a step back a little bit, and they really need these last 2 weeks to try to solidify a spot in that top 8.
And that's where we'll start in 4A. And as you touched about, Eric, you know, the Beckley Flying Eagles got off to a great start at 5-1, but they've had 2 setbacks each of the last 2 weeks, with a loss at Princeton 14-7 and then a home loss to Spring Valley last Friday 33-17 in a game that probably wasn't as close as maybe the score indicated, because at one point, I know when we were doing our game, you were given the score. It was 21-3, I think 33-9 at one point, and it finished 33-17.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that really hindered the Beckley team this week. And you and I know in the Princeton game, you know, they came out, they led 7-0, and it was a type of game where they could control the tempo because they were playing with the lead. They got behind early. You know, our field reporter was at the game and got behind early in that game. I think, like you said, 21 points put up by Spring Valley in that first quarter. And once that Beckley team gets down, that really forces their hand, and really predictable passing downs. It's hard for them to really move the ball.
Yeah, one of the unique things that hardly ever happens, the game that you and I were doing on Video Productions, Independence and Princeton, it was 21-3. Then our field reporter texts you, the Spring Valley Beckley game was 21-3. So it was kind of odd that the game we were at and the game our field reporter was covering for us both had the exact same score at the exact same time.
Yeah, and it was wild. And, you know, once we figured that Beckley got behind like that, I knew it was going to be a steep hill to climb. But, you know, final score, you know, notwithstanding, it showed that they did not lay down, and they kept grinding, and, you know, to close it out at 33-17. And I think they can build up on that leading into this big game this week.
Of course, we all know that all 16 teams in 4A qualify for the postseason, but for Beckley, and I think you would agree, Eric, and I don't know what all the math is, and I don't try to figure that out till it's over. If they win these last 2 games, which is Oak Hill on the road on Friday, and then the final game of the regular season at home with George Washington, I think that would give them enough that they can get in the top 8 and have a home game. But if they split, I think they're on the road, and definitely if they lose both of them, they're definitely on the road.
Yeah, and it's one game at a time, and this Oak Hill game looming is a big game, and I think both sides will be fired up, and I just think Beckley just needs to go try to handle business on the road in Oak Hill.
Well, it's always been a big rivalry, and, you know, going back into the 70s, I can remember the early 70s when they only took 2 teams. I think this was 1971. Beckley was undefeated. Jose Rodriguez was Beckley's quarterback at that time, and Oak Hill was called Collins High School at that time, and Beckley had to beat them, and Oak Hill beat them. Oak Hill only won like 4 games. They were 4-5, and they upset Beckley by 1 touchdown and knocked Beckley out of the playoffs. Then in 1976, Pete Carlos-Hurto's first year as head coach, Beckley won the first 8 games, and they were 8-0. They lost to Bluefield at home, and they had to play Oak Hill the final game. And if they'd beat Oak Hill, they would have got into the playoffs. They only took 4 teams at that time. And I remember it snowed so bad that they moved the game from Friday to Saturday, and they played at Bob Pruitt Stadium, which was Van Meter at the time, where Park is. And they had to go in there and had to brush the snow, clean the snow off the field. And Oak Hill had a losing record and upset them 12-6 and knocked Beckley out of the playoffs. So, and then last year, you and I did the game on Video Productions, and it did knock Beckley out of the playoffs, but it was a huge win for Oak Hill, beating Beckley. Actually, Beckley did not make the playoffs last year,
yeah.
And that loss, I'm sure, had something to do with it. And Oak Hill beat Beckley at the current Van Meter Stadium.
And we were at that game, and it seemed like at some point in the game, seemed like Oak Hill was overmatched early, but that old momentum came, and they had a quarterback that really put the team on his shoulders, and he really damaged and hurt Beckley on 3rd and longs. It was a bunch of 3rd and longs. I think at one point it was a 3rd and 18 back against
they converted, yes.
And they converted it, and I think that was the feather in the Oak Hill's cap beating Beckley. No matter what, they want to hold serve and do it again in Fayette County Friday night.
Right. Malachi Lewis was the quarterback last year for Oak Hill. Oak Hill got in and Beckley didn't. So I know none of those games, what happened last year and what happened in 1976 and 1971, has nothing to do what will happen when the two teams take the turf over at Fayette County at Oak Hill. But there is a history.
Well, I was going to say, you're just giving a history lesson.
Right, right. I was just telling you there is a history of that.
Yeah.
And the history as far as Beckley trying to beat Oak Hill again, the playoffs hadn't been good.
Yeah, it hasn't.
So
It hasn't.
Beckley needs to turn the narrative a little bit with the win.
So Beckley, when you tune into this, you need to flip the script on them this week.
And that'll be a great game, we think. And we'll have field reporters at that game. I know I'll be at another game, and so our field reporters with an S, we'll have two field reporters that will keep me up to date. By the way, as always, this podcast is brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. And you never know when you need your heat fixed. Like my mom needed her heat fixed. Modley showed up within an hour of me calling them right on time, got it fixed, took care of the problem. Modley's 304-253-HELP, and by Massey Power Sports. And also, Eric, we have to do what?
Like, share, and subscribe at Warden Broadcast Network on YouTube.
All right, also talking about another Raleigh County team, that's Shady. You mentioned it early. Shady got a huge win on the road. They defeated Nicholas County 27-21. They are now 6-2, and their last two games will be at home, and that's one of the games of these last two games that Shady Plays Video Productions will have. Bill O'Brien will join me for that one, and it'll be Shady against Westside. Westside 6-2, so both of these teams fighting for home field and to qualify for the postseason.
And that one leading into the postseason is everything you would want if you're Shady. You're hosting a team at your place that will give you a ton of points and a few bonus points once you get the victory, if you were able to pull it out.
And not only that, the final game of the regular season for Shady will be the first time ever playing Wheeling Central. And also, Wheeling Central is a AA team, even though Shady's AAA, but still that would give them some points. And if Shady's able to win both of these games and finish 8-2, I think they can get a home game.
Well, this is Wheeling Central's fourth trip to the southern part of the state.
Well, they went to
James Monroe.
and they went to Midland Trail.
Midland Trail.
I'm not sure if they went anywhere else, but
Okay, so
at least three.
Three times. Yeah.
And they're coming to Shady for pizza, I understand.
Yeah, they said, hey, just give us some pizza. And I told you, watch out for a team that just wants to get a little meal if they're coming to your place. They must think they can come and get a
But
W.
the two Raleigh County teams we've already talked about, Beckley and Shady, everything is right there in front of them for them to play, and they really do have their own destiny right there in front of them.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, you just go out and handle business. I'm going to use a line from my man Al Davis, just win, baby. And that's all you need to do.
And that's right, because you never want to get in a situation where you have to win in two or three. This team's got to beat that team, and this has got to happen, that's got to happen, and the stars got to align with the moon and all that. You just go out and you win. If you win, everything takes care of itself.
Hey, coach can go in there and write one letter on the board, W.
W, that's right. If we do this, everything's going to work out.
That's right.
All right, we're going to talk about the game that you and I had over at Coal City. Princeton 48-10 win over Independence. And I will say this, and you can follow up on this. First of all, if you're Independence, yes, you're disappointed that you didn't win. And yes, you had your home win streak snapped. Independence had not lost a home game since October of 2020. But I don't think they should hang their head, because Princeton is a heck of a football team.
Yeah, not at all. And the thing that Coach Lilliott spoke up on, it wasn't that, they weren't just happy to be there. It was a big opportunity. And I'm going to tell you, that first quarter was everything you would want and scripted perfect after the kick return that Princeton struck. I mean, it was lightning fast. But Independence didn't fold. They got the ball in ball control. I think it was a 12 to 14 play drive.
Yeah, 14
play drive. And the best defense was their offense at that point, because they were able to drive and flip the field. And then they punted it, and Princeton took that one back too. That was called back. But after that, I thought in the middle quarters, the late first quarter to middle of the second quarter, I thought Independence kind of imposed their will, and woke Princeton up, where I thought they said, well, we got to really play, because this team's not going to lay down.
Well, I will say this, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to watch two tremendous returns, one that counted and one didn't. The opening kickoff, as Eric spoke about, the Markel Lowe ran back, and that the punt return that the Mosser kid for Princeton that he ran back that got called back. You can go to YouTube and watch the replay of the game you and I called, Video Productions. And I'll tell you what, they were two of the most electrifying, amazing plays that I've seen.
Well, man, if you look at this Princeton team, let's talk about them for a second, because people, if you haven't seen them play, you need to go watch it. They are dynamic. They have 3 game breakers, and we haven't even talked about the Jennings kid,
Daniel Jennings, who signed at Penn State,
signed at Penn State, and all he did was carry the ball 4 times for 104 yards, and made it look easy. So I mean, they have great wideouts. Quarterback doesn't make mistakes, throws a nice ball, and you know what you get with Markel Lowe. I don't know. You saw his gear is just a little extra. When he runs, he's running with a purpose.
Well, that opening kickoff, that ball, and I watched the replay again, that ball looked like it died on about the 25-yard line. And then when he picked it up, and before he got to the corner, you said, he gone. Because I watched it again this morning. And I mean, he had like a second and a third gear, and he had a convoy going down the sideline. So once he turned the corner, there was nobody was going to catch him.
Like I said, it looked like he had a police escort into the end zone, and that was electrifying. And that Princeton team can score in bunches. But they also, let's face it, this Independence team, that team is a high-powered offense as well. They have Christian Linksweiler at the wideouts, Brady Rose, and let's not forget the bell cow, Silas
Nelson.
Oh my goodness,
and Brock Green with a big strong arm. So Princeton knew what they had to do, and they really were able to impose their will late in the game and secure the victory. Yeah, both Lowe and Mosser, they caught their kickoff and punts in Coal City and ended up in Sophia, and they did it so quick. But anyway, electrifying that it was. But anyway, Independence, they have a bye week, and I think their bye week comes at a great time, kind of regroup a little bit. Their last regular season games against Summers County, and I think Independence can finish in the top 8 and get at least one home game.
Yeah, and that's all they want to do. You want to. With only 9 games, unfortunately, the Bluefield game couldn't be made up. But they have a championship pedigree. You get one home game, and anything can happen in that first round. One could lead to 2. Someone could get upset. That's why you play the game on Friday and Saturday in the postseason. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I'll tell you this. After watching Independence battle, like you said, it was 7-3, and they had a chance to get a lead, and they couldn't convert on the 4th down. And they kind of got away from them right there in the last couple minutes of the first half. But watching as good as Princeton is, and this is not knock on any AA team, because I know Frankfurt's good, the number 1 team. I know Rome's good, but I know that Independence has got to feel good that they're not going to see anybody in the postseason with the skill level of the players that Princeton has.
So let me say what you're trying to say. With all due respect to the top 2.
That's right.
With all due respect to you guys, and I'll piggyback that one. I don't see a complete top to bottom Frankfurt roster, Rome County roster that's comparable to that.
Nobody in AA. I don't think
not AA. Hey, y'all don't see a lot in the 4A ranks that have. Right. I mean, you'll have your Martinsburgs and your in Spring Mills, but
Huntington Hurricane.
But you're talking about skill position players. Those 4 guys that we mentioned can match up with anybody.
I think you could put Princeton in 4A, and I think they'd be one of the top 5 or 6 teams.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we'll see how that all plays out as we're winding down to the regular season. And then in Class, AA, Liberty, they had a hard-fought game. They lose to Midland Trail. Both teams really needed to win. Midland Trail, with that win, they go to 2-5. Liberty with the loss, they fall to 2-6. Midland Trail wins the game 28-18.
28-18, yeah. And I think I didn't get a chance to do my research on this game, so I'm sorry. So I didn't get a chance to contact one of the assistant coaches like I usually do. So I don't know what the turnover rate thing was with them, but that has been their problem leading into that game. Well, many turnovers, and it's hard to beat.
I was told by some of the people who attended that Liberty game that they got behind early, and they said they had a terrible third quarter, and they had some turnovers, and that's been like their bugaboo. But they came back strong, and they just came up a little short. But I understand, though, that the quarterback, Jackson Workman, did play in that game after we thought he was lost for the season.
Made it back.
Because he got hurt in the game you and I did down at Pikeview.
And that's a big shot in the arm for them, and they have, probably could use the other quarterback somewhere else, and get as many of your best players out there as you possibly can.
This podcast brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You can dial up Modley's 304-253-HELP and by Massey Power Sports. And Eric, we need to do what?
Like, share, and subscribe at Warden Broadcast Network on YouTube.
All right, now as we come down to week 10, we're looking at some of the biggest games in each class. And in Class 4A, George Washington 7-1 take on Hurricane 6-2. And to me, what makes this so good, Eric, is that George Washington has Beckley following Hurricane, and Hurricane has Martinsburg following this game with George Washington.
Yeah, and neither team though wants to look ahead because you got to take care of what's in front of you. And Hurricane will host Martinsburg. Martinsburg
Correct.
will make the trip, down to the southern part of the state. And because they want to come and check out, and they want to drive through Charleston probably and say, hey,
that's where we're going to be.
That's where we're going to be
Yeah.
in about a month,
Well, for Hurricane, they have George Washington at home this week, and then, like you said, to close out the season, Martinsburg. So that's too big a part of Hurricane, not George. Hurricane has George Washington at home, and then Martinsburg at home.
And you're talking about with a chance to really, really rake in some bonus points. If you win those two games, you're Hurricane.
You're probably
you
top
shoot
two.
Top two.
Top two, yeah.
Definitely. So look for them. The whole city will be down there to watch both of these games probably.
And we take a look at the 3A game. It was hard to find it because at this time of year, because of the scheduling, there's a lot of people in mixed classes because at the time when Beckley made their schedule, they thought Oak Hill was going to be 4A like they are, and Oak Hill ended up being 3A. And that looks to be like it's Oak Hill's home game, they're 3A. That looks like to be the top 3A game, even though Beckley is 4A. There's a lot at stake because we already know that Beckley's going to make the playoffs no matter what happens because all 16 teams do. And Oak Hill, even if they lose, they're 7-1. Oak Hill's still going to make the AAA playoffs, but you're talking about seeding and trying to get a home game.
Yeah, and Oak Hill, their last game also was against a 4A opponent and University, and that's on the road. So everything's right in front of, like you said, both of these teams. And I think there'll be a little extra juice on both sides for this game. And we won't there's no need to mention what the juice will be, but I just think both of these teams are defensively sound. And I think the team that makes the least amount of mistakes on offense, and I mean converting those fourth downs, keeping drives alive, because both of these defenses can choke you out if they get up.
Controlling the line of scrimmage. Winning the trenches up front will determine who's going to win the game.
The big boys up front will decide this game.
And then when you look at West Side and Shady, both teams are 6-2. I know we talked about it earlier, but it feels like a playoff game because both teams are 6-2 and they're both battling for playoff positioning.
Yeah, and this West Side team likes to air it out and get after it. And Shady, real multiple, but I think with Jalen Bailey and the wideouts that they have, this could be one of those games where they just go up and down the field on one another.
Scott is 6-2. They're taking on Winfield 4-4. Scott looks like they're going to be a solid playoff contender in Class AA, and Winfield still maybe trying to find themselves at 4-4. They probably have to win out maybe to get in.
Yeah, but Winfield's schedule is one of those those tricky ones. They have 4 losses, but if you look at their losses, I think 2 of those are against 4A schools.
Well, they are. That's what I say, but they probably have to win out.
Yeah, but they have to win out,
yeah.
And you're right. And this is. I think they were able to go to Scott played Scott maybe in the playoffs last year.
Well, yeah, and you and I saw Scott. We saw him against Independence, and Scott had a chance to win the game. They were driving down 6 with a chance to win, and they threw a pick down there.
Through interception.
Toward the end of the game. Yeah.
But like you said, this is a playoff game for Winfield. They have to really get this victory.
And this podcast brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating. You can dial up Modley's 304-253-HELP. You never know when you're going to need a plumber, especially at this time of year when you never know when you need your heat readjusted, and you don't know until you know, and then you need to call Modley's, and also by Massey Power Sports. So Eric, now we're going to switch gears to college football and take a look at the West Virginia Mountaineers. And the Mountaineers got a much needed victory before their bye week. They go out on the road and they beat Arizona, and they had a lead and they had to hang on at the end, but they got it done 31-26.
Yeah, and had a lead, and then most people say you hung on, but I think that Neil Brown silenced the critics just for a little bit. A lot of people didn't give him a chance to win this game, because their kryptonite is teams that really, really can pass, and that the wide out for Arizona may be the best wide receiver in all of Big 12 land, other than Travis Hunter from Colorado, but he plays both ways, so we really don't know what he is. But like you said, I think WVU got a tough, much-needed road win. Now they get a chance to heal up because they played without their starting quarterback, and one of the best linemen in the whole nation in Wyatt Milam. So I think that was a big victory.
All right, so that's my next question. If Green's healthy, does Green step
definitely.
back into the quarterback position?
Yeah, you roll with him.
All right.
You roll. He's dynamic. He does. I'm not taking anything away from the backup QB. He did what he was supposed to, managed the team, played really well. But you still roll with Green. I'm in the favor. You don't really lose your spot to injury like that.
All right, so West Virginia 4-4. Here are their final 4 games. You're going to be at their next game, which is November the 9th. They play at Cincinnati. Cincinnati has got 3 losses. They had a tough loss at Colorado this past week, but that won't be easy. But it's a winnable game.
Yeah.
And Cincinnati and West Virginia have had some battles over the years. Then West Virginia will have a couple of home games. They'll have Baylor, definitely a winnable game. Central Florida winnable game, and then they'll finish up their final regular season game on the road at Texas Tech. And even though I think they did beat Texas Tech last year, Texas Tech is a team that's had West Virginia's number more times than not over the past years.
That is one of those. That was the first victory in the Neil Brown era against Texas Tech last year. And Baylor, of course, they beat Baylor, but it was the last play of the contest, a play that, well, not last play, but the last series of the contest to win that. But all of those games or winnable games. So it's right out there still in front of West Virginia. I never expected them to beat Kansas State. I really didn't. But Iowa State game kind of stung. I thought had their chances a little bit. But those games are in the rear view. If they can win this Cincinnati game, which is going to be a tough road contest, and then you're sitting there with 2 home games to get back, into bowl contention.
Well, I'll say this. I think Texas Tech will be tough, but I agree. I think Cincinnati, of the 4 games they have left, on the road at Cincinnati, I think it's the toughest.
The toughest one today, and it is because the Cincinnati, they've really turned it around too. They lost a close one to Pitt. They were a big against Pitt, and we know what Pitt did to them, what they did to West Virginia. And a lot of people still, I think they discount this. The teams that beat West Virginia are all undefeated.
Yeah, except for Kansas State.
Well, Kansas State, except for them. But all of them, they've lost one game.
They're all top teams.
Top teams.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I think that West Virginia can handle business at home with Baylor and Central Florida. And you hope they could split, or hope they can win both of them. But even if they split, say, Cincinnati on the road and Texas Tech, if they finish 3-1, maybe not the year you're looking for, but maybe you should get a pretty decent bowl.
And that's what it's about, finishing strong. And I think they have a chance to do that.
Marshall, their next game will be at home Saturday, November the 2nd. They take on Louisiana Monroe. And same way with Marshall. Marshall has a chance to, if they can get these wins coming down the stretch of the regular season, put themselves into a pretty nice postseason situation.
The thing that Marshall has to fix after I've been tuning in until the last couple of games, they haven't been able to finish. They jump out to big leads in the last 2 contests against Georgia Southern and Georgia State. And they were able to fend off Georgia State, but unlucky against Georgia Southern. So they need to fix whatever that second half problem is.
And for Virginia Tech, they're 5-3 in the ACC. They'll be at traditional Big East rival Syracuse. That was always a great Big East battle, Virginia Tech and Syracuse. Now they're both part of the ACC. They'll play at Syracuse. But then Virginia Tech has Clemson at home. And I can't read my own writing here. I'll have to see I can't quite tell who that next to last game, and they close out with UAV.
Well, if you can't read it, I definitely can't read it.
You can't read it. But anyway, we're talking about taking one game at a time.
That's right.
And they have to go on the road at Syracuse.
Yeah, and it's always a tough trip, and playing in the Dome. So Virginia Tech just needs, I think Syracuse, they're up and down. They're coming off a loss last Friday night, so they'll be trying to get back on the winning track.
All right, this podcast brought to you in part by Modley's Plumbing and Heating, 304-253-HELP, by Massey's Power Sports. And Eric, you have to do what?
Like, share, and subscribe at Warden Broadcast Network on YouTube.
As we take a look at perhaps the biggest college football game this week, Ohio State and Penn State. And Ohio State has had Penn State's number over the last several years. And I think if Penn State is ever going to get Ohio State, I think this is the year that they do it.
This is the year. This is the setup. And I think it's going to be a real tough for Ohio State to go into Happy Valley.
Happy Valley, that's right. It's at noon kickoff. Yeah.
Happy Valley and get one. The way that they're, Ohio State people, the toughest fans I think in all of America, really. I mean, no matter how they win, they're winning, but they're still like, we're not very good offensively. It's going to catch up with us. But I think defense always travels. I think this will be a battle of quarterbacks. Quarterback play. Penn State's quarterback has really been playing steady all year. And Ohio State's has kind of been on a roller coaster.
Well, now here's the big thing. Maybe you notice, maybe you don't. The Penn State quarterback got hurt, and he didn't play in the second half against Wisconsin, and he's questionable. And I agree with you. I think for Penn State to win the game, they need their number one guy out there.
Yeah, they need that question mark to be removed with an exclamation point that he's going to be out there, because it will be hard for a backup to come in.
But I think it's going to be a defensive, low-scoring battle, fought out in the trenches.
Oh,
two good defenses.
old school Big Ten football.
Big Ten.
Running
Woody Hayes and Joe Paterno, right?
Yeah,
or
the
at least
ball.
the spirits of Woody
Exactly.
Hayes and Joe Paterno on
That's
on
going to
the
be a good
sideline.
one to watch.
All right, also the largest outdoor cocktail party in the world takes place in Jacksonville, Florida, and Georgia. And Florida, it used to be Florida would dominate Georgia. Now it's kind of flipped where Georgia's doing the dominating.
Yeah, and they dominated them so much in the 90s and the mid 90s that it got Jim Donnan, my former coach, got him fired. You're talking about a guy that went to Georgia, won 6 straight bowl games, but couldn't beat Florida.
Yeah.
And he lost one year to Florida and Georgia Tech back to back, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back right there. So
I saw this interview with Blake Shelton, of course, a big country music star, and he is a huge Georgia fan. And he said his childhood was destroyed by Steve Spurrier because Florida always beat Georgia in that big game. So, and Georgia should be, which I haven't seen what the actual line is, but they should be at least a touchdown favorite.
Oh, heavy favorites. If it's a touchdown, circle that for me.
Well, now we're going to switch gears to the National Football League. And we're going to start out with our barking dogs. Not only did both of our dogs bark, they bit, they chewed, they spit out. We both had the Washington Commanders. And if you didn't see that game, ladies and gentlemen, where have you been? You should. What a tremendous finish of how Washington was able to pull that game out. And Eric, you and I, we watched the biggest part of it together. And even though Washington was dominating the biggest part of the game, they were making mistakes and they couldn't put the ball in the end zone. And the Bears kept around close enough and looked like they were pulling it out until the end of a sensational sequence.
I'm going to go back to what you said. The whole first, second quarter, you're like, I'm telling you, they keep kicking these field goals. They need to score a touchdown. They said you let them hang around, and that's what happened. They let them hang around, and then all of a sudden they're down 14-12, just like that.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing finish, and I actually think it was poetic how it ended, because the Bears didn't take care of business, and nobody saw it. That cornerback was taunting the crowd, running around, pointing at people, and the ball gets snapped, and he's still yapping, and the play's going on.
Well, let me take you back a little before that, when it was 12-7, and the Bears had a 1st and goal, and they run what they thought like refrigerator repair. They run a lineman, and listen, I'm not criticizing the coach, but in the NFL, you pay receivers to catch the ball, you pay linemen to block, and you pay running backs to run the ball, and they hand the ball off to this lineman, and it looked like he just threw the ball.
It wasn't even close.
And I'm sure if you're a Bear fan, you're thinking, what in the heck are they doing? And then for Washington, after the Bears took the lead, it was 15-12, and they kick off. And I said, the thing, if you're Washington, you want them to kick it in the end zone because you don't want to run it out. So they run it out, and it costs them like 6 seconds. And then they have an incompletion. But I thought one of the terrible thing is that the Bears allowed Washington to throw a 15, 20-yard out to McLaurin to catch the ball shy of midfield, to even put him in a position to throw the ball.
Yeah, and I heard an analyst, Bill Belichick, of course, talk about that. And he said what we call that as a free 5, and ended up 13 yards. And he said he would have put press coverage with safety's eye and don't give up that easy throw, because it would, if you snuff that out, it ends up being a 50-yard throw that falls short of the end zone, and where you really keep the ball in front of him.
Because we saw what a great arm that Daniels has, but he never would have been able to get the ball to the end zone.
Yeah, from where he was.
Had they given that up. And I thought what really helped, a couple things made the play. Like you said, the guy that was over, he was yakking and taunting the crowd. You could see, if you watch the video, that Washington's receivers, they're running, the play's going on, and he's got his back to the play.
And then all of a sudden he
runs over there, and he's the one that tipped the ball that went back. Guy caught it, and you never let anybody get behind you. But I thought what made the play by Jaden Daniels, that he was able to run around and finally get set and set up to throw the ball.
So Belichick even spoke about that. He says what we would do if once he starts a scramble, because it's going to be a scramble, whatever side he went to, if he went right or left, whoever was the last pursuing defender wouldn't try to tackle him, just stay and box him in where he would have to throw it
on the run, or not get to a spot.
Or stop, not get to a spot.
And that's why Aaron Rodgers has been so good doing that, because he's able to get to a spot. And Jay Daniels got to a spot. And here's the thing. You know, anytime you throw up a Hail Mary, anything can happen like that. But the things that led up to that should have never happened. And the Bears are probably kicking themselves, because if it comes down to the Bears miss the playoffs by one game, they're going to look back at this game as to why they don't make the playoffs.
Well, if you look how tough their division is, they still have to play Detroit
twice. So got to play Minnesota twice, Green Bay twice. Right.
That could have been the nail in the coffin right there. They could spiral after losing a game like that.
They very well could, but that was both of our barking dogs. So, Eric, with that, you finally got back on the winning track. You're 4-4 through 8 games. I'm 5-3. And before we get into this week's barking dog, we do have to talk a little bit about the Dallas-San Francisco game, which was a great rivalry game. It looked like San Francisco was pulling away. By the way, once again, I'm not an official, but we watched enough football, and I didn't have a dog in the fight. Yep. But that definitely looked like pass interference on San Francisco. They got Kittle free to score that touchdown that put them up 27-10.
And I'm not saying they wouldn't have scored after
even
that
on that same series.
But guess what? It was a third down play.
Right.
They called that. They would have, moved them back. It would have been tough for them to score. And if you hold them to a field goal there, you're really right in it. But that's neither here nor there. The third quarter was the demise of the Dallas Cowboys, giving up 21 points after playing great defense.
Great in the first half. Without a lot of their stars.
Yes. So, I'm a Cowboy fan to the end, but I think no moral victories, because no one's going to give us anything, and especially in the media. But I think with all the injuries they had, they finally manned up, and they didn't get pushed around like they had the previous game against Detroit.
Well, here's the thing, too, is I'm watching the game. All the referees throw the flag simultaneously. So they all saw what they thought was an offensive pass interference. What I'd like to know, I'd love to be in that huddle, that who or what or how they came up with this side to pick the flag up. Yeah. Like, who came up and said, well, maybe that wasn't. I would love to hear that conversation.
I mean, the inside receiver took out two Dallas Cowboys.
He just took him out, yeah.
I mean, nobody was in the picture, the coverage, but that's neither here nor there. But I thought Dallas battled, and they had a chance. The last series with 3 minutes and change.
3:24 to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually thinking we're going to go down.
They didn't even get a blade of grass. That was 4 incomplete passes. They didn't even get a first down, and it was 4 terrible play calls. We do some intermediate stuff. Heck, even run, throw a screen. You have to get first down yards, and we've talked about that. On any level of football, you don't want it to be 2nd and 10. You want it to be 2nd and 6. Something like that, right?
Where the defense is guessing, because you can either run on that down or pass. So yeah, it was just a bad sequence.
But now that'll get us to our barky dogs for this week, and I think with that loss to Dallas, they need a lifeline, and I think they get it this week. That's my barking dog. I think they beat Atlanta this week. Atlanta coming off a big win on the road against Tampa, and for the second straight week, that we're going to have the same team as Eric will take Dallas as well. And ladies and gentlemen, I promise you, we don't discuss our picks. We don't discuss any of our opinions prior to this. So we're going to see how much we actually agree, or we may not agree. But
we forgot to go to the writers and tell them what we need to say.
Yes, and we have to do what?
Like, share, and subscribe at Warden Broadcast Network.
And this podcast, like all of our podcasts, brought to you by Modley's Plumbing and Heating, 304-253-HELP, and by Massey's Power Sports. Also, we're going to have a separate podcast coming up. Then Eric and I will be the College Football Committee of 2. We haven't discussed our picks on this, and we're going to pick the 12-team playoff as it stands now, not what we're predicting, and we're going to go week by week and see how our committee shapes up with the actual committee, and we think you guys will enjoy that. So, I'm Eris Lowery.
And I'm Eric Thomas.
And this has been, you might not agree with us, and we need to do what, Eric?
Like, share, and subscribe at Warden Broadcast Network.
Until next time, see you.